Hello there. Today I want to talk about cache coherence. I often hear things like, look, my code is optimized for cache coherence. It's all linear data accesses. And I hate to break it to you, but this is not about cache coherence at all. This is about memory locality. And I think it's worth clearing up this confusion of vocabulary because A, it's interesting to learn about the differences and that there are actually two different concepts. And B, if words can mean whatever we want them to mean, why don't we align on something that actually makes sense as their meaning? So, memory locality. Memory locality means you have predictable local memory access patterns. For example, linear memory access, but it doesn't have to be linear, just means you don't jump around in memory a lot with your accesses. These linear or local memory access patterns, generally speaking, are good because you're likely to use your cache well. You're likely to hit things in your cache. It's unlikely that you request some data that is not already in your cache. With linear memory access specifically and variants of that, you even get the added bonus of making your prefetcher happy because the prefetcher can predict what you're going to access next and it can pre-fetch it before you need it. Great, right? The other thing is that with linear memory access, you actually use the stuff that you load into memory or into cache. Wonderful. So all of this is great for performance, and that is probably what most people talk about when they talk about my code makes use of cache coherence. Your code is just using memory locality really well. That is what you talk about. So, cache coherence. If this to you looks like a demonic summoning circle, you probably aren't familiar with some of the most common protocols for ensuring cache coherence. This is the modified owned exclusive shared invalid protocol that attaches a tag, one of these 5 states, to a cache line to make sure that this cache line is the same in all of the caches that your chip has. So, cache coherence. Cache coherence just means the caches on your chip don't go out of sync. Your chip might have multiple caches, for example, different cores on your chip might have separate last level caches, which means that whenever you think about having something in memory, it's not quite right because actually there might not be one source of truth, not one memory, but that same thing might live in different caches, might be present in 5 caches at once. If you change one of them, you better change all other of them because otherwise your caches are not coherent. That is cache coherence. That means when you write to one cache line in one cache needs to be either evicted or updated from or in all other caches outside of its own hierarchy of caches, or maybe even inside, depending on the specifics. But the point being that these caches, they need to communicate in some way to ensure that they stay coherent, that they give you the same view of the data. And that's where cache coherence and cache coherence protocols come into play. Your code probably, or rather hopefully, doesn't influence cache coherence at all. It's a feature of your CPU. If your caches aren't coherent, then either you have a weird CPU or a broken CPU. And you're going to run into very interesting problems. There are, of course, things that your code can do that have an interplay with cache coherence. For example, 2 different processors writing to the same cache line repeatedly in an alternating fashion. They will always evict the cache line from one cache and put it into the other cache, and they will need some kind of updating from one cache to another cache, and that might be slow. But generally speaking, that is not what people seem to mean when they talk about their code being optimal for cache coherence. Thank you for listening to my short rant about cache coherence versus memory locality. And I hope I never have to hear again that your code is friendly for cache coherence because it's using linear data access. Thank you.